honored to be here, glad to be here. We'll just hop right into it. Gentlemen, fat protocols rule Web3. All the money's going to the infrastructure layers. How do we see this continue in the AI sector, and how can we mitigate that? Anyone wants to hop in, I don't care.
I mean, I think that, an analogy is like AWS versus Amazon as a whole. Like the fat protocols are the AWS, and famously, AWS makes a lot of money for Amazon, but it's only like 16% of their gross revenue, I think. So it's a contributor, but it's not anywhere close to like, how much money Amazon actually makes with the stuff with their fat layer. And so I feel like it's the same thing for blockchain, basically. We need to find the right application for these protocols, and then those applications will start to carry the value instead of the protocols themselves.
Okay. I just jumped the gun a little bit, got a little too happy. If you guys wanted to do a little TLDR on who you guys are first.
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm Zac Winstrom, co-founder of Breadcrumbs. We're here to help you take control of your personal data.
I'm Zach Horn. You just heard from me. I'm the head of marketing at Akash. Akash is a decentralized marketplace for cloud compute.
Hey, I'm Antonio, one of the co-founder of Warden Protocol, a new layer 1 blockchain built with Cosmos SDK as a platform for smart contracts that will be able to use AI in it.
Anyone want to add to that, or we can get to the next one? I'll take it from a different direction. I think if you look at access to compute today, right? Like you have centralized hyperscale cloud providers. They have, if you're an AI developer, you're going to want the highest performance chips, A100s, H100s, et cetera. You can get those on Amazon, but the problem is if you're a small developer and you go to AWS and you try to get access to those chips, either you're going to be priced out because they're simply too expensive, or they're going to want you to sign a long reserve instance. You just don't have the capital to do that. So if you look at decentralized marketplaces, as separate from these centralized cloud providers, what you get is competitive pricing that emerges because it's a decentralized network, which drives costs down. So all of a sudden you have this dynamic that emerges where if you're an AI developer, you're naturally seeking out these decentralized networks, not because of decentralization from a theoretical perspective, but because it's cost efficient. And all of a sudden that unlocks this whole mindset where they'll go, okay, we'll jump through some UX hoops to get to compute on these decentralized networks like Akash and others, if I can get access and you have the chips I need and it's at a price I can afford. So, I don't know if that gets right to the fat tail question or the fat chain question, but I think it's just fundamentally decentralizing these resources and having as many providers competing in the marketplace. That just is better for everybody.
Okay, so first of all, we're not at Warden building infra for computing, so I'll take that from a different perspective. You mentioned FAT protocol, and I think for us, for example, that we're building a platform where other developers will build apps on top. I think it's important that everyone gets a slice of the pizza. So I'm Italian, I need to talk about Italian food at least once in every conversation, sorry. So the idea, I think it was Archway that introduced incentives for the Cosmos and smart contracts developers that will get a slice of the fees every time their contract is actually being used. I think that's super interesting. It brings incentives to everyone, to the builders, not just for the protocol. So I guess crypto is a weird world where everyone is a bit greedy and tries to make money, but I think it's important that everyone gets a bit of it. So you incentivize builders' activity, you reward that, and so that's how you grow organically instead of just artificially inflating activity that doesn't really matter, doesn't really bring value.
Absolutely. And right now, throughout all of crypto, everyone's fighting for users. It doesn't matter if it's a DeFi protocol, AI protocol, DePIN, any acronym that they came up with afterwards. I mean, a lot of people here in Cosmos have been DePIN before the acronym DePIN. So, how do we get 1 million users? When's that going to happen? Like, what are we going to do to get 1 million users in a decentralized infrastructure layer?
I'll jump right in on that. I think it's happening right now, and I think it's just a matter of time. One of the things that I think is going to get this there, it's fundamentally finding out where the key places are to transfer value, and then finding the cohorts of people who want to access that value and letting it happen over time and letting that grow, right? So I just talked about AI developers before, but it's not just individual AI developers, right? It's just from Akash's perspective, it's startups, it's companies that are even a little bigger and they're starting to grow and they want to scale. But fundamentally, it's not going to the out to the market and saying, it's like AWS, but it's decentralized. It's saying, we have the chips that you're looking for right now at a price that you can afford, and you can get them on demand and scale as you want. And that's a salient value prop above and beyond just decentralization, quote unquote, as a buzzword.
Anyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to dovetail off of that. I feel like, you can't just decentralize something and then expect people to use it if it doesn't actually add value. So to hit 1 million users, what I think we need to do is find that killer app that's applicable in the real world. Like, you're using decentralized technology not because it's a buzzword, but because you're able to do something qualitatively different with that technology. And crucially, it's something that impacts like everybody. Something as wide-reaching as like Facebook or Instagram or something, except that it's reliant on decentralized technology. And when we see that killer app, I think we'll quickly hit 1 million people, and I think we are close to it.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, for example, GPT models, to keep it about AI, GPT models existed for a while, and then when ChatGPT came out, it exploded. The interest about your average user that doesn't really know about the tech got really high really quickly. And now everybody thinks AI is this kind of magic bullet that can answer any sort of questions because they don't know how it works. They don't care. And to answer the question about the million user, I don't think we'll see 1 million users of AI applications anytime soon in our decentralized world. I don't think we are at that scale yet, and we're nowhere close this stage. I think the biggest company, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, they are at that level. They can do it because they have all this money, all this infrastructure, but doing that on a decentralized architecture is much, much different. And if you cannot trust a single entity, this is a big problem. And so I think there are many projects trying to work in that direction, but I guess it's a long way. That's my bottom line.
Yeah, so I mean, thinking about it, AI can't be the best version of itself without decentralized infrastructure. It can be, to be honest with you, quite dangerous. If you train models to have biased data, I mean, who's to say AI couldn't essentially eliminate humans, So
Right.
it's a wild thought to think of, but it's to pivot into that. Do you think that how can we promote AI? Like we're in such a world that it's so like blockchain is so transparent, but in a sense, it's not good for AI. So like, how do we make that transition? Do you think? If that makes any sense.
I think fundamentally, you look at what you need for AI, right? Look at the constituent parts, right? You need data, so you're going to need to source data from somewhere. There, you can get into that. There's a whole vertical that's going to require, a tremendous amount of things to be built to put in that infrastructure in place. How do you source data? How do you label it and sort it correctly? How do you bring it on chain? How do you make it verifiable, et cetera, et cetera? Then you can look at compute as its own vertical, right? You're going to need that to do, training and fine tuning and to run inference. So then you get that whole question of, well, where are the chips coming from? How are you bringing them to market? How are they making it to end consumers, right? So I think you just break things down, and part by part, you start to figure out, what do we have today? What do we need to get to a minimum viable product of distributed training or verification or some of these other things that we're starting to push towards now, and you go from there. I think we are getting very close to a lot of these things that we need. Compute's already really far along. I talked to a lot of people who are working on data right now, and that space is moving along really fast. So I think we're just on a growth curve right now, and we're somewhere in the middle, but I think we're speeding up, is my view.
Yeah, and going off of that, like data is food for AI, and the way that it's sourced, and sort of like data provenance is an increasingly important thing, and that's actually something that blockchain uniquely can bring to the space. We can add proofs around like where did this data come from, how is it sourced, and prove that it's more reliable than some other data sets. So the decentralized nature of what's going on. Sentinel, our friends that just did this commercial, are releasing they have a decentralized VPN service, and they're adding an AI layer on top of that for data scraping. So it's like decentralized data scraping, where anybody with their Android device can basically be a one-off data scraper. And because it's on a decentralized infrastructure, you can prove that this information is the information that you're looking for. It's formatted in the way for your training use case or whatever. So there's quite a bit of synergy between these two sort of spaces.
I agree with what you said. On the other hand, I don't think really users will care about that. They don't care about improving the decentralization or the source of data. They are important things, but we should reach a level where the user doesn't even need to know about that. I mean, it's great for who works inside the industry. It's not something that a user-facing product need to show or care, or present to the user. So I guess from a user perspective, user experience perspective, we should reach that level of abstraction, because your average user doesn't care about OpenAI having all your data. They don't care if OpenAI is literally scraping all the web and every single website without caring for copyright and other things like that. They just want to ask ChatGPT something, and they want to get an answer. And so I guess that's it. That's why I said it's a long way before. There are also a lot of things to be done in that direction.
On a lighter note, since you brought up the blue guy, do you guys ever find yourself like discouraged that you guys are all doing amazing things in the AI space and monumental innovative tech, and it seems like, right now, all anyone talks about is meme coins. So does that ever like discourage you guys at all?
I personally don't follow all of these. I know all the buzz around meme coins. I guess it's part of the blockchain industry. It's part of the community. It's part of the culture that was created in the past few years. So it's part of the game, I would say. Even if I don't personally follow them, I'm not discouraged by them. I'm actually happy to see more and more buzz around blockchains.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not discouraging. It's a way to make it more accessible to people, right? Like you were saying, they don't care about the underlying technology. They just want the thing to work. But at the same time, there's clearly a huge interest in the world of crypto, and if memes make that even more pervasive, I'm all for it.
I don't know if I have a very strong take on meme coins, but I'll say this. What's interesting to me is that the space is so big now that you can spend all day talking about decentralization and permissionless software and how to run inference on a decentralized cloud, et cetera, et cetera. And meme coins are like, they're not even 10 miles from that conversation, So I think it's just part of the permissionlessness of the space, which is kind of great. And you can get into the ideology of permissionlessness, and that's a whole thing, right? But it's like, if that's a thing that can be done, and that's what people want to do, and it's all within the bounds of what users want, then great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna spend more of my time over here, but that's awesome. Go for it.
Yeah, I think people look at it as like a social experiment, and it's crazy. Every single conversation outside of crypto, I always somehow turn it into a crypto conversation, and then people are like, "Oh yeah, I own." You ask the random guy like, "Oh yeah, I own some Dogecoin." It's like the only thing they talk about is meme coins. So in a sense, for me, it does get a little bit frustrating because I've been in this space since early 2021, and to see the leaps and bounds of just the user, like the UI, UX, and I don't think you need a PhD degree anymore to do anything in crypto, and it's nice to see it's always pushing forward, it's always getting better, and I just hope that we can kind of gravitate that average user that only cares about meme coins and show them that the tech is revolutionary and the benefits of using, for storage and for privacy and for everything else. And that's my only hope and wish. And maybe it takes the next cycle, because it seems like this cycle is all anyone talks about is meme coins. But anyhow, to pivot from that, on a more serious note, how has, with the regulations always shifting, how has that been on all your fronts? Like, what are you doing to stay ahead of it? Like, what's your hot take on the regulatory environment currently?
Well, for breadcrumbs in particular, it's not a problem. It's actually, we try to align ourselves with these regulations as much as, actually the more regulation in general, that's probably better, because what we're doing is helping people reclaim their data sovereignty. And so, legislation like GDPR, CCPA, or the European Data Act of 2024 directly back us up. It's not an issue.
I think from the Akash perspective, we spend a lot of time in DC talking to legislators, and I think my hot take, for lack of a better term, is that legislators, this is from a US perspective, I'm based in the US. I think legislators are going to take a very even-handed stance to regulating decentralized networks broadly and compute networks specifically, because they're fueling so much growth right now and they're moving so quickly. The sentiment that I hear is that they're not going to step in and, with heavy-handed regulation when they're not even sure how these things are growing yet. So they're very much in like a wait-and-see kind of mode, where let's see how these things evolve, let's see how they grow over time. We may legislate at the edges to curtail very specific things that happen, but I don't think we're going to see any very heavy-handed regulation in the US.
For me personally, I haven't faced any regulations yet, probably. But one comment, I said earlier that OpenAI is scraping the web without thinking about copyright infringements or anything like that. And what I personally want to see more is, or I'm curious about, is how regulations will evolve in that sense for these large language models, including data coming from other people in their own model training. And this then becomes one of the billion parameters in their model, and your output is based on that. So how do you regulate that? Something to think about for sure.
So one of the things that really frustrates me in crypto as a whole is it seems the average user and the community, it's all about where they can invest in speculation, vaporware. You look at the teams I'm not going to name teams outside of Cosmos, but some of them are worth billions and billions of dollars, and then you go look and it's nothing. It's like, it gets frustrating. So where do you guys see that going? And if you had to forecast over the next several years, what do you think maybe the new narrative or where a lot of investment's going to go towards?
I don't think there is speculation. It's part of the space. It's been there since, the start. I've been in and around crypto since 2017. I think the way this evolves over time, it's fundamental. It goes back to the first thing I was saying. Who is providing real value today, and is that value verifiable? Are these projects open source? Are they transparent? Can you query the chain if you want to, verify stats? Are those stats made transparent to users? That gives you a proxy for, is there actual real product value being created here, and is it being transferred to users, right? I think the projects that are doing that and building are going to be really successful over time. I think there's going to be hype cycles, because I think that's just part and parcel with the industry, but I don't think that's discouraging in any way. I think it's actually motivating to the teams that are really, really working right now and building real value, and then everything else is going to come and go.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity, especially with AI, to unlock everything it can do on data that's more immediately relevant to you, like some kind of application where you can look up what you did last week. It's weird that you can look up, who the third Roman emperor was, but you can't really say how much money did I spend at the airport yesterday. And so that's a great use case for AI, things that really just get to the core of what AI can offer, and then attach it to the right information, I think are really investable opportunities.
I think we'll see more and more improvements and advancements on the AI side, even outside of blockchains and Web3 worlds. And when AI will become cheaper to execute, we'll see cheaper model, more specialized model, and this will enable more and more applications. So that's why we're betting on AI, particularly on Warden. I guess that's my answer.
So it seems in general in this space that as a whole, like privacy, I guess everywhere, it hasn't been like a sexy take. It hasn't been something that's been sought after. Do we ever see that changing where it's just a priority first?
Absolutely.
If not, and I was going to say, if not, like what's the reason why?
Well, I think the reason that people don't care about privacy is because they don't actually know what they're giving up. You know, like it's like, oh, the government's spying on me. Well, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care. But if you actually like saw the data set that the government had, even if there's nothing to hide, it's just like creepy. You know, it's like I don't want somebody else knowing that. It's private information, and so increasing visibility and sort of just like educating people more, exposing this more, and making it more relevant to everyday people. I think people will naturally become more concerned with privacy over time. I think it has to happen.
I think fundamentally privacy is being built into the architecture of the space at the moment, right? So if you're a builder, I think you care, if you're in the decentralized space in any way, shape, or form, right? You care about privacy because it's fundamental, right? You know, like being open source, building in privacy into the architecture of these networks, I think that's just something you believe in fundamentally, right? If you're an end consumer and you're using like, I don't know, an AI chat app, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I think that's a feature that can be sold and communicated, but I don't know if that's quite as strong of a selling point. But I think people that are building within the space do care about it deeply, and I think those choices and that vision is being built into the fundamental protocols of the space. That's my view.
Yeah, totally. I also think that's why we're seeing raise of attention in the private computing products. So you want to compute something, you don't want to reveal your input and reveal your output of the computation especially. And so this is important. I think there is space for both class of users, let's call it that way, like more privacy-oriented user that don't want to reveal that, and a class of product that is a bit different and targets more the average user that maybe don't really care about this. But as you said, privacy is built into Web3. I mean, we build in a decentralized, censorship-resistant way, so usually everything is private by default. Well, it's public, anonymous.
It's very public.
It's public, but anonymous.
Yeah. My take was when I got into this space, my background's in accounting and finance, so I always looked at a blockchain as a decentralized accounting ledger that had the perfect equations, had a fundamental value, and super transparent, obviously. But I looked at it as kind of a downfall too, because everyone could see your transactions. It's like, oh, if this was to get adopted, you're going to get a merchant, you swipe your card and it gives you your address, then that person could see how much you're worth or not worth and all your transactions. And it always kind of seemed kind of weird, to be honest with you. And I feel for the people that have been building things, and sadly, they build something and it seems like humans are always going to abuse something one way or another. And for someone out there that builds a privacy solution and then gets in trouble for it, this seems weird, and I hope that kind of changes over time. It seems like it is, so that's my take on it. Anyways, I don't know how much more we have left. If you guys had any closing thoughts in general about the space, your Dubai trip, or what's going on, please do so.
Closing thoughts. Well, I feel like, again, just to emphasize, people don't understand how useful their data is and how much AI can unlock its value, and how decentralization can actually provide that privacy and provide scalability and affordability, like with what Akash is doing. We use Akash at Breadcrumbs, and it wouldn't really be scalable if you guys didn't exist, so that's really fantastic. And so, broadly, the direction that we're going is not just a more private world, it's simultaneously more private and more increased data access. It's just that the people that actually create the data are more aware of it and own it, and it becomes a new asset class. And that's an exciting thing to watch unfold.
And then for that, like how difficult is it in general for a chain to kind of get together and mesh their mad scientists together, if I will?
Well, yeah, it depends on the mad scientists and the chain and everything. I think, it's an honor to be in a place like this when you have these types of mad scientists, because I think it's a lot easier than probably anywhere else in the world right now.
So, in closing, just back to your point on transparency from a minute ago, it just had me thinking. The transparency is fundamental to the space, but it sets up all of these projects that are being created right now, especially in the AI space, right? If you look at decentralized AI, you look at how powerful some of these models are going to become, how powerful they already are, and you look at the growth trajectory, right? Whether it's an S-curve or whether we're truly on like an exponential and we're going straight to AGI, it's going to be one of those two, right? But either way, these are powerful things, right? And if you have, this goes back to the core of Web3 and decentralization, if you have a couple companies that have fundamental control over those models and can bake in their preconception and bias into those models, and you have zero verifiability of what's going in, I don't think I need to sell anyone in the room on why that would be a bad thing, right? So part of that transparency and the open source nature of this, the space that we're in, sets us up for primitives that fundamentally change the evolution of AI. And that sounds like a buzzword, but it's really not, right? Like, it is going to evolve. These models are improving, and the question is, which direction are we going?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And I think there is so much to do in every different direction. So from computing to private computing and privacy to inference verification on-chain and everything. That's why we're seeing so many projects, so many buzz around it. And it seems like it's growing and at an incredible pace. And that's actually exciting for me. So these are my final thoughts. Yeah, AI is there, is staying, it's evolving and growing and growing. I still don't see the final shape of it. We're building it right now, so we're in the middle of it.
Nice. Yeah, I wish we had more time, and I can go on and on and on, but this is the first time that I had a convo really that was only 25 minutes, or maybe it is, maybe it's less, I don't know, but this is maybe an X space, Twitter space recap at some point where we get on some deep rabbit holes. That's my style. So,
let's do it.
Anyways, thank you everyone. You guys did an amazing job. Give a little round of applause to all our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.